All right, we are live. I'm Kevin Knutson, your host for this interview. Joining me, I've got Christine Kuhns, a coworker of mine, colleague at Adobe. Christine is an account executive by day and a yoga and mindfulness coach by night. How's it going, Christine? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, great to see you. Doing great. Excited to be here.
Cool. Yeah, we're excited to have you. I think most recently what connected me and you was your post on LinkedIn about how you went to Bali for a month on your sabbatical. That sounds legendary, first of all, and I'm excited to hear more about that. We'll dig more into that, but I'd love to start this out by you kind of just introducing yourself, maybe a little about your origin story, kind of where you grew up. I'd also love to hear, as part of that, kind of how you first got into sales and how you got into yoga as well. So let's hear about you.
Sure. So, born and raised in Southern California, very active upbringing. Yoga, mindfulness was a part of that. And I also have family that's in sales. Did it a little bit growing up, and then went to school up in Silicon Valley, was surrounded by tech, which led me to, just work in tech, have different roles at startups, et cetera. And ultimately, sales just interested me. And on the side, I always was doing yoga. So ultimately decided to get my certification. And I think that about covers the bases. Right now, I'm based in
Cool.
New York as well.
I love it. Yeah, that's very cool. I think sales is definitely one of those career paths. I mean, for me, when I was first growing up thinking of sales, it's a very the word sale has a has a reputation. And I think as we've grown older, we've really learned that it's about the value, the relationships, being in front of people. That's what I've loved about it. So very cool. I'd love to hear a little bit more about Adobe and kind of your path there. And if I remember correctly, you started as an intern. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool. Tell me more how you kind of found yourself in that, and kind of why Adobe. Like, we both work there, and I think Adobe does a great job of helping us live our best lives and being the best versions of ourselves, which I think is super important for people who are kind of feeling stuck and not necessarily as happy as they could be. So I'd love to hear how you kind of landed at Adobe and what it means to you to work there.
Sure. Yeah, I've been at Adobe from an intern up until now in field sales, and I've had some really cool opportunities along the way in business development, strategic partnerships, et cetera. And kind of how I found it, I mean, I stumbled upon it on LinkedIn, and then
Oh, cool.
you can connect through your second, third degree connections and
Yeah.
ask about how they like it. And everyone was so positive, and they had this program for interns called the Sales Academy. So I ended up working my way through that, and it's been a really great experience. And the company overall just supports your growth and also encourages that balance in your life, which I like.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so funny you say that, because that is also how I found Adobe was on LinkedIn from a second connection that just randomly was. I was like, wow, that's so cool. That sounds like a great company to work for. And it is. Now that we're here, I definitely can share that they have great values that help keep us, motivated and moving forward in the right direction. That's so cool. I'd love to chat briefly. Sales, especially early on, is very much a grind. It is. It is tough. I think we both did the BDR job where you're making a lot of cold calls, a lot of cold emails, things like that. What when you look back on those days, what kind of helped keep you motivated, or what got you excited about doing that job? Because I think there's a lot of people in that area currently, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, people. But we want you to be enjoying where you're at right now. So share a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a job that you work pretty hard to do, and you don't always get a lot back from it.
Yeah.
But what was cool about that time was I was based in San Francisco, and then I had a lot of other peers that were in the same grind. So we all got to learn from each other, to take best practices. And so I think that's kind of what kept me motivated is the other people around me. And I've just noticed that as I've gone through the years of still being around here is the people really, bring you in each day to try to do your best.
Yeah, I love that. I think the word that was thrown around a lot when I was first joining was world class, right? Like we
Yeah.
are a world class business. And that really resonated with me that like I can become world class. Like if I put in the work, that's who I can be. And that got me stoked to be at the company. I was like, wow, I am surrounded by world-class people. So it's really, really awesome. Thanks for that. I really want to jump into your experience at Bali. So for those who don't know, at Adobe, after 5 years, you get a 1-month sabbatical. No strings attached. Just go live your best life. So tell us about that experience for you when you took that.
Sure. So first it was deciding, okay, I'm actually going to take this and
Yeah.
doing the research. I had toyed with various ideas of how and when to get my teacher certification. And I just decided what's a better time than to do it now. I found a really great program in Bali, just kind of booked it and didn't look back. So that was that. And it was 3 intensive weeks of 7 a.m., 7 to p.m. of anatomy, philosophy, actual yoga movements and poses and classes with people all over the world, teachers very authentically taught in India. So it was a great use of time.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I would love to hear, your big thing right now that you're focused on is really kind of mindfulness around technology. And it sounds like being in Bali for a month would definitely be a great disconnect. Tell me more about that experience and when you came back. I mean, you live in New York City right now, so I can only imagine this very stark difference of Bali and New York. I mean, how did that impact you?
Huge. I mean, I'd say it was a transformational time of just fully disconnecting, no emails, no Slacks, hardly any texts. You are just in the moment learning. And during that time, you just get so many creative ideas and you're really connecting with people. And it made me think, how can I have this kind of balance in my day-to-day life? It's achievable. You just have to have the awareness around it. So that's kind of how the whole yoga and mindfulness coaching idea came to be.
Yeah, it's so cool. Such a unique opportunity. I think we all need a month to just be away from it all and really understand kind of who we are at our core and what's important to us.
Right.
Um, for me, yoga has always just been hard, first of all.
Yeah.
Least flexible person ever, but I think that's just kind of something that comes with the term yoga that a lot of people think of. But for me, there's also this headspace that you gain when you're there, right? When you're focused on your breathing and kind of your mental game that changes. How has yoga become kind of more of a physical thing than anything else? It's transitioned into parts of your life. I think you alluded to that a little bit of coming back to New York. It's given you a greater balance, if you will. But tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think I started out yoga over 10 years ago for the physical of just getting some exercise, flexibility, all that. And, wherever you're at in that journey, it's supposed to be about you on the mat, but you can't help sometimes in comparing
Sure.
yourself and all that. Um, and then I think as it's progressed for me, it's both about the physical and the mental. And at that same time, I'm working in tech, and I just kind of notice I'm able to filter out distractions and prioritize a little bit better, which I
Mm,
really think has helped me in sales
huge,
and being in New York, which
huge.
you both could, I mean, you could say they're pretty stressful at a high level, but if you find the ways to prioritize and manage that, it's uh, makes it a little easier.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I mean, it's I think part of something I'm interested in writing this book is really helping people become more intentional. And from what it sounds like, yoga really helps you do that. You're never, I mean, for me personally, when I leave a yoga session, I'm never in a thought process of like, oh, what do I want to do now? Like my head is always so clear. I know
Um,
exactly what's coming next. And I think that's just an amazing skill that you've developed
mhm.
that, other people can develop. I'd love to jump more into kind of more actionable things. You're a teacher now. So, when you're getting in front of a group, um, I'd love to hear kind of what you're sharing with those individuals and kind of the impact it makes on their lives if you get return students and things like that. I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. So I think a lot of being a teacher, whether it's a big group or a smaller group, it's everyone's going to take away different things
Yeah.
from it. And so it's about meeting them where they're at and encouraging them to just be okay with that. So I can offer some different poses or some, you know, nuggets of wisdom, but it just depends where they're at. So I never try to, say do the most advanced pose. It's kind of
Sure.
it's okay to, you know, we're all working on something. So being a teacher doesn't mean I'm up here and they're down here. It's like we're both working and improving, you know.
I love that. That's super cool. I think that we don't, the world we live in today doesn't view things like that. Like everybody's got to be at these different levels all the time. And it's so easy for us to just constantly compare ourselves. I mean, comparison is the thief of joy. Like I say that to myself, I swear, at least once a week, because
Right.
that's just kind of the world we live in, especially with technology,
Mhm.
social media. But something you're talking about is the power of getting started. I mean, that is the most underrated thing that I have ever experienced in my life. I mean, me, for example, I wanted to write a book. I've wanted to do it for years. And I literally just told myself, just tell the world, like, put it out there. Right. And I wrote this post on LinkedIn, and now it's crazy. So many people are reaching out. I have just instantly gotten so many people to help me. And like you're talking about, people who have written books who I'm like putting them up here, they're like, no, like we're right here. I'll
Yeah.
introduce you to a publisher, walk you through, how to build out a script and things like that. And man, it's so cool. I think a lot of people feel stuck. We go to work every day, and it can be easy to feel bogged down and not be intentional as we should be. And I'd love to ask you primarily, growing up, I think we all have very different backgrounds that have, life is an interesting journey. And I'd want to hear kind of maybe what's got you the most excited at different stages of life. I mean, let's take, for example, like elementary school. Tell me about a time. And for me, when I'm stoked and I think back on these memories, there's two common threads. Time just like didn't exist in that moment because you're just overwhelmed, and like the fondness that you look back on that memory is just, I think a buzzword now is core memory. Like this is a core memory now. So I'd love to hear maybe about that. And it doesn't have to be elementary school. It could be anything that sticks out in your mind.
Sure. I mean, so much of how I look at things now, I'm like, everything can be as good as you make it. It's like the attitude that you bring into it. So when I look back, I'm like, a lot of it was when I was playing sports, I don't know, at the beach, just kind of careless with friends, hanging out. I mean, those are like the very simple times, but those stick out as you're losing track of time. You are in the moment. And I think we can find that now. It's kind of emphasizing having fun, and I guess even scheduling that into our day to day sometimes.
Yes. Yes. That is actually going to be a chapter for my book, because it's so funny when you're growing up and you're younger, you don't wake up every day and schedule your day, like things kind of just happen and fall into place. And I think that's what makes it being magical as a kid. But nowadays, now that we're, working full time, and I think time evaporates if you don't own it and be intentional about it. And I think that's a very powerful skill to have, about scheduling joy into your day. And, for you, it sounds like yoga is one of those things that's like, I do this every day. Like, I have mindful practices I do every day. I'd love for you to share with everybody kind of what are some of those things that you do every day that's just kind of at the core of who you are, and how that also bleeds into helping you have a better day, week, month, year. I think you've got a good template when it comes to that mindfulness that I'd love to hear more about.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of playing around with routines and adding different things in. And then also, I'd love to say that I do these things every day, but some days they just slip, and that's okay as well. But it's getting active, going on walks, to the gym, occasionally journaling or meditating, using technology, Headspace app to do that is super helpful. A few times a week, see friends and catch up with family. I mean, it's the typical things that I think most people do and fit into their days or weeks. I think those are all important for me to do to kind of feel like my best self. Most of it's just getting active and making sure I prioritize that.
Yeah, that's cool. I definitely agree. One cool thing that I did, and I talked about this with the last interview, was when I was feeling super bummed out, my wife and I, we were not feeling like ourselves. And I just said, okay, let's just get a piece of paper and let's just write down Kevin likes to. My wife's name is Summer. Summer likes to. And we just filled the entire page. And as you get further down the page, you're starting to think about things that seem so simple, but really bring you so much joy. Like, you're talking about things like calling family. And I don't think that's highlighted in the social media world or anything like that. I think there's a lot of those small things. And I think one thing that comes to mind for me personally, when I'm sick, you have this thought to yourself, like, I will never breathe like a normal human being ever again. And it's like, when you're doing yoga and things like that, and they're walking you through kind of your breathing and feeling different parts of your body. And I think that's so powerful. And it's just taking the time to slow down too,
Mm-hmm.
allowing yourself that, I think, is really cool. So for those who don't know, Christine has a newsletter. It just started this year, and great nuggets in there. I just read your newsletter that came out yesterday, and my favorite tip that you gave in there was, you said, use technology to distance yourself from technology. Basically, I did not say that as elegantly as you did, but I would love to have you share a little bit more on kind of those tips, how people can not distance themselves from technology, but use it to their advantage and create that space in their life.
Yeah, I'm glad that it resonated with you, and just getting started, starting to build a community of people who are recognizing, especially after COVID, oh my gosh, I spend so much time on screens. How can I just have a balance and not let the technology control me? And so I'm just sharing some of the things that have been helpful as I go through the same journey myself. And so some of those, like you mentioned, just starting small and looking at your iPhone settings and muting it after 10 p.m. And before 7 a.m., for instance, or deleting apps from your phone that don't really serve you. I mean, social media could be a distraction for some people. What else? I think letting yourself be bored or really noticing when you're stressed and not immediately grabbing your phone in those times, like I mentioned on the subway or in these passive times, kind of using those to just be reflective or be with the other people that you're around. And lastly, just making a list, kind of like you mentioned with you and your wife, of all the activities that you really like to do and
Yeah.
see if being on your phone is one of them. And if that really makes you feel good, because, we all have limited time. You want to use it the best you can. And technology is a great tool, but you want to use it, to your advantage.
I am laughing at myself because what you just said is being on your phone on that list. No, like no way did I write like I like to be on my iPhone. Like that does not ever come to mind. But how much of our time is spent there? I remember the first time, and it's a thing now where they tell you your screen time. But back in the day, you would check like your battery and it would tell you like how much you've used every app. And I was like, wow, this is insane how much I'm on my phone. Like I heard yesterday that the average amount of time someone opens the phone a day is 150. And I'm like, okay, that's wild. Like you gotta have it, right? Like I think
Yeah.
we live in a society, we have jobs where you are constantly needed. And COVID highlighted that even more so than ever. Everyone's working from home, and the gap between work and personal life has just become very, very smeared. And I think it's one of those things where happiness really comes from us living in a moment, right? And
Mhm.
tell me about that experience. I've never been to New York, so tell it like you were there. I mean, tell like you were on the subway, is that right? So what's that like? Tell me, like you're going down the tunnel. Is everybody just like this? Like tell me about that.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's just one example, but it's everywhere you go. And I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. It just is.
Sure.
You look around, you're waiting in line for coffee, you're at the grocery store, you're on the subway, and people are just they're consumed by whatever it is. And I mean, I notice podcasts, TikTok, reading, texting, like any activity you can imagine on your phone, you're just doing during whatever time of the day.
Mhm.
But notice, are you doing it because you want to be doing it, or like because
Yeah.
it's just there and you feel like you have nothing else to be doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it almost kind of creates this mental space that you feel like you're being like productive somehow. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you're getting stimulated, right? Like, I think that's what all the media companies know. They know us better than we know us, right? And
Right.
for me, that it's almost scary, right? That like I I have somebody out there that like is serving stuff up to me because I because I don't know what I want in that moment, right? And getting back to what you're talking about, like scheduling joy and scheduling things that excite us is honestly the polar opposite of social media, right? In
Mhm.
my eyes, it's like that's me using my own brain telling myself this is what I want versus somebody else telling us what we want. And
Right.
that is really where I think we find happiness because it's part of who we are. It's kind of has this like accomplishment, if you will. Um, yeah, it's a very unique thing. I'm very invested in in your newsletter and hearing more of kind of how this thing goes for you. Tell me, so in wrapping up, I'd love to hear kind of the future plans for you. tell me more of kind of where you see things going and how people can stay connected with you.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate you following along, and I'm so excited to, keep up with what you're doing and everything as it
Yeah,
all keeps growing. So, like we've talked about, we're just taking these first steps, and putting ourselves out there, kind of not making excuses. So I committed to bi-weekly putting out these newsletters and hoping to just build a community of other people that want to talk about
yeah,
how to be balanced with technology and be more mindful in our day-to-day lives. And then I'm imagining that that grows into whatever other channels or forms. So I'm kind of building some back end, maybe courses around it, eventually books. And I just see that this is the beginning of the conversation. So I'm pretty flexible with where it goes from here. I just want to connect with other people that are interested in it.
yeah, I love it. I think it's honestly going to be a huge topic in the future, and you're in the right frame of mind to start helping people. It's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, Christine. This has been great. Let's do it again. I think, anyone who's not following Christine, give her a follow and a like or a connection on LinkedIn. I think that's the best way for people to find you. And yeah, appreciate it. In parting, any last tidbit thing that you'd love to share with anybody, or you feel like we covered it?
I feel like we've covered it. I mean, we're all work in processes, and it's just kind of being aware of that and doing our best every day. Yeah, it's exciting to be here. So I really appreciate it, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, Christine. Well, thank you very much. We'll be connecting soon. Take care.
Awesome. Take care. Bye.